Tammy with Country Diggers here. You know, I have always been fascinated with the Titanic history ever since I learned about it in the 3rd grade. So today I'm going to go into 10 Titanic survivors describe what the sinking was actually like. And I'm going to be reading from Ranker.com by Elise Hennigan. So stay tuned. Over 100 years after the RMS Titanic met its demise on April 15th, 1912, the story of the tragic wreck through Titanic survivor accounts continues to haunt and mesmerize people worldwide. Out of over 2,200 passengers, approximately only 700 people survived to share their stories. Many Titanic survivor stories have been lost to the passage of time. Some survivors were hesitant to share the harrowing details of this experience, never speaking publicly about the sinking of the Titanic. Others went on to share their Titanic sinking stories and rescue stories through interviews, memoirs, and speaking engagements. These first-hand accounts talk about the chaos, the anxiety, the horror, the items that were lost, and the strange beauty of one of the most luxurious ocean liners that had ever been seen slowly sinking into the water. In the wreck and its aftermath, families were torn apart, great loves were lost, and a tremendous amount of life was sacrificed. These accounts bring us back to the terrible and fateful night all those years ago. Number 1, the Navarrete orphans shared their father's last words. Separated from his wife, Michael Navarrete decided to run off with their 2- and 4-year-old sons and take them to America to start a new life. He bought second-class tickets for the Titanic and traveled under the alias Louis M. Hoffman. After the ship struck the iceberg, Navarrete regretted the terrible surprise that awaited their mother. One of his 2 sons, Michael J., remembered his father's final words. "My child, when your mother comes for you, as she surely will, tell her that I loved her dearly and still do. Tell her I expected her to follow us, so that we might all live happily together in the peace and freedom of the new world." Because the young boys only spoke French and had traveled under an alias without their mother's knowledge, it took her a month to find them. They waited unclaimed in New York until their mother recognized their picture in the paper and hurriedly sailed across the Atlantic to retrieve her sons. Number 2, a third-class passenger recalls the locked passageways. Finnish newlyweds Ellen and Pico Harkarani boarded the Titanic to start a new life together in America. Ellen spoke of the fun they had as third-class passengers. After a couple of days at sea, we settled into a routine, attending church services, after breakfast, strolling the decks, and during the evening playing games in the third-class general room. On the night of April 14th, the couple heard a suspicious scraping sound. Pico went to see what had happened, and Ellen went back to sleep. When she awoke and tried to get out of bed, the cabin was tilted at an angle. Her husband was still gone. At that point, other passengers were awake and milling around the hallways. Ellen's husband was up on the deck, but all of the third-class passengers were locked below, she says. After a few moments, I grabbed my purse and life jacket and ran out to the passageway. The door was locked. All the doors were locked. Eventually, she was allowed up top. Excuse me. Eventually, she was allowed up top and made her way onto a lifeboat. We rolled away quickly, watching our ship slide beneath the surface of the water. The screams of those in the water were horrible. I remember calling over and over, "Pico, Pico, I am here, come this way." It was cold on the lifeboat, and I wasn't wearing warm clothes. I didn't know if I was falling asleep or freezing to death, but I drifted into unconsciousness. Excuse me. Soon after, it was daylight, and we could see a ship in the distance. We would be rescued and made warm. Once aboard the Carpathia, the passengers and crew did their best to console us. We were given clothes, food, and hot coffee. But with all we were given, I was still lacking. I slowly realized the last words I might ever hear from my husband were, "I'm going to see what happened." I remember standing at the railing for hours, looking out to the open sea, and hoping upon hope that I would discover just one more lifeboat. Pico did not survive, and Ellen never saw her husband again. Number 3, a governess describes the chaos of the lifeboats. Elizabeth Schutz, 40 at the time, was traveling with a family who employed her as a governess. After the ship hit the iceberg, she was quickly ushered onto a lifeboat and with other stunned passengers. She was eventually rescued. She later described the experience. Our men knew nothing about the position of the stars, hardly how to pull together. 2 oars were soon overboard. The men's hands were too cold to hold on. Then across the water swept that awful wail, the cry of those drowning people. In my ears I heard, "She's gone, lads. Row like hell or we'll get the devil of a swell." Excuse me. Goodness. Number 4. A secretary reflects on the moment she saw the ship that would save them. Laura Mabel Francatili, a 30-year-old secretary from London, described the arrival of the Carpathia, the ship that would save them. "Oh, at daybreak when we saw the lights of that ship about 4 miles away, we rode like mad and passed icebergs like mountains. At least at about 6:30, the dear Carpathia picked us up. Our little boat was like a speck against that giant. Then came my weakest moment. They lowered a rope swing, which was awkward to sit on. With my life preserver round around me, they hauled me up by the side of the boat. Can you imagine swinging in the air over the sea? I just shut my eyes and clung tight, saying, 'Am I safe?' At last, I felt a strong arm pulling me into the boat." Number 5. One woman remembers that terrified look on the men's faces and their heroism. Helen Churchill Candy was a feminist and single woman traveling on the Titanic alone. At age 53, she was so attractive that at least half a dozen men in first class, including Colonel Archibald Gracie, seemed inclined to protect her. She later wrote with respect about the workers who dutifully gave their lives. A group of stokers, steam engine workers, fleeing the water-filled decks below, appeared. Each face reflected the sight he had seen, a sight of coming death. Each knew what the passengers did not know. All of a sudden, the junior officer who led them gave a shout, "Halt!" The men did as they were told, turned around and went back down below to their desks. I looked with profound admiration at the descending column of men who could courageously relinquish their life. Number 6, a survivor remembers the men who were desperate to get on the lifeboats. Annie McGowan, 15 at the time, was traveling with her aunt from Ireland to New York. She gave her first interview of the tragedy at age 86. Women wouldn't leave their husbands. They were screaming, and I could hear gunshots in the background. Apparently, some of the men had tried to dress like women in order to be rescued, and they were shot. She recalls men begging to get in her own lifeboat. They said, "Let me in or I'll tip the whole lifeboat." Of course, we had to let him in. Okay, number 7. Ruth Becker recalls the strange beauty of the ship that night. Ruth Becker was 12 years old when she rode on the Titanic in second class with her family. Many years later, she described the strange but terrible beauty of the ship as it slipped beneath the water. The night was dark, no moon. It was very dark, black night, and that boat was just beautiful. All the lights in the boat were on. It was just a beautiful sight. It was going down quietly, and the lights were going underwater as it went down. I remember that very plainly, as it was a beautiful sight and a terrible sight, as we could see the boat was going down. Number 8. Excuse me. Charlotte Collier describes the panic search for loved ones. Passengers who were rescued by the Carpathia arrived in New York a few days later and began their anxious search for loved ones. Charlotte Collier, a second-class passenger who was 31 years old, described the search for her husband. There was scarcely anyone who had not been separated from husband, child, or friend. Was the last one among the handful saved. I had a husband to search for, a husband whom, in the greatness of my faith, I had believed would be found in one of the boats. He was not there. Number 9. Eva Hart explains moving on to live her best life. Eva Hart was a 7-year-old second-class passenger traveling with her parents when the Titanic went down. She lost her father but carried on to live a full and vibrant life after she was rescued. She spoke frequently about her life after the Titanic. People I meet always seem surprised that I do not hesitate to travel by train, car, airplane, or ship when necessary. It is almost as if they expect me to be permanently quivering in my shoes at the thought of a journey. If I acted like that, I would have died of fright many years ago. Life has to be lived irrespective of the possible dangers and tragedies lurking around the corner. I wish people realize that now, don't y'all? Number 10. One woman recalls making snowballs when the ship hit the iceberg. Edith Russell was a 33-year-old fashion stylist and consultant traveling first class on the Titanic. She was one of the few survivors who has spoken about actually seeing the iceberg before anyone knew what was happening. There was a very slight bump, just a little jar, nothing at all. I went in my room. There was a second light jar, nothing of consequence. But you knew something had happened. One man said, "That's an iceberg, and it's a whopper." Because you know there's 1/8 above the water and 7/8 below. After this blooming thing is rising all the way over the top of the ship. We thought nothing of it. We picked up the bits of ice and most of us played snowballs. Well, hope y'all enjoyed that. If y'all ever get a chance, there's a museum, a Titanic museum up in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. I have been there. I've went through it, and it is amazing. They give you these little cards that has a survivor or not a survivor on there, and it tells about their life, what they were aboard the ship and everything. Mine was I was the oldest person on the Titanic that survived, and what you do is just go through the museum and you see all these artifacts that were on it. The staircase is a replica, but it is like, if you've seen the Titanic movie, it's like that staircase in the Titanic movie. And the piano is the actual piano that was on the Titanic, and one of a kid, got over there and started playing on it and played for us and everything, and it was neat. And, excuse me, they had a thing of water out, a tank of water, that was the same temperature that night when the ship sank. And we held our hands and arms in there as long as we could. And you could tell that it wouldn't have took long for them to actually freeze to death in that water, because I could not hold my hand in there very long at all. And at the end of the tour, though, you got to go read about the people that was on the Titanic, and the person on your card is up there too, and you could see if you survived, if that person you had survived or not. But it was neat, and hope y'all enjoyed. So see you back soon. Bye.